What country do you want to visit?
I'm not really too keen on different countries and stuff. I don't really know about which specific country I would like to visit and etc.
I'm more of a more interested in countries in Asia than in Europe. In my opinion, I believe Europe has a lot of boring countries and stuff. Europe is kind of, I don't know, overrated. Asia is kind of overrated as well. What about Africa? Yikes, Africa is kind of scary. Africa is very, very scary. Wasn't Ebola popular there and, other sorts of problems like that? What about poverty, crime, pollution? Africa is very, very scary and not somewhere I would like to go to. Isn't that a little bit, a racist? Isn't that racist to complain about Africa in any meaningful way? I mean, Africa is a continent, not a race, so that's not even important in this regard. I quite honestly cannot even imagine living in Africa. I just do not like that type of place. Well, isn't that racist then? Isn't everyone supposed to love Africa and African people and etc. and blah 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 blah? Well, I don't know about that, but Africa is not my cup of tea. What about other parts of the world? What other parts would you want to go to? I don't know. What about North America? I don't know. America is kind of a little bit boring. I don't know. Not really a lot of unique, interesting places. What about South America? I don't know. Maybe Brazil might be interesting, but there's a lot of crime and other types of issues like that. What about the Middle East? What about the Middle East? The Middle East is like Africa, very scary and other problems like that. What about, I don't know, what about other parts of the world? I don't know, what about Europe? Europe is kind of obviously okay. Obviously, it's probably a lot better than a lot of the world and stuff. But yeah, a lot of Europe is kind of a little bit too boring and plain and stuff. What about India? India is a little bit like Africa. It's kind of, well, it's kind of, what's the word? Very shitty, if you get what I'm saying. Well, what about, I guess, I don't really know any other parts of the world. What about Antarctica? I don't think I'll even be alive if I go there. I don't know, no. I guess my favorite place would be, I don't know, England, I don't know. Thanks for this discussion, Big Sonic. No problem, Small Sonic. My favorite countries. This is going to be a video on what are my favorite countries. Obviously, this is going to be about me and my opinions, so you can't really complain about anything I say, all right? But this is a video on what are my favorite countries, right? Obviously now, the world is very big, right? But there's like different types of geographies that you can kind of look at. You have Asia, you have Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and then you have North and South America and stuff, and obviously maybe Siberia and stuff, which is kind of a little bit, is related to, obviously, to Asia, but it's kind of, you can kind of see that as its own thing, I guess, I don't know. But to begin with, like, in terms of like, let's in terms of looking at like just larger, in terms of like larger geographies, let's just look at countries that are in Asia. What are my favorite countries in Asia? And I believe that, China, Mongolia are super, probably at the top of this list. China and Mongolia, in terms of like countries in Asia, I really do like China and Mongolia. And obviously Japan as well is pretty cool as well. I don't need to explain anything about Japan. Obviously there's quite a lot of people that really admire Japan and Japanese culture and stuff, but so in terms of Asia, right, countries in Asia, I really like China, Mongolia, and Japan. And and a lot of people kind of, when obviously when we're discussing Asia, a lot of people, obviously I'm going to get to a South Asia as well, right? One of my favorite countries in South Asia, which is kind of like, East Asia, South Asia. I mean, some of these labels, right? It's supposed to be like, there's supposed to be Asia and stuff, but obviously you can divide it into South Asia, which is filled with Indians and stuff like this, and East Asia, which is filled with East Asians and Chinese people and people that look like Orientals, people with I don't know, different features than Indians, people that have like smaller eyes. I don't know if that's very racist and offensive, but whatever, But again, in terms of East Asia, countries in Asia and East Asia, at the top of my list would be China, Mongolia, and Japan. Now because of these countries, right? Mongolia, what's that? Why Mongolia, right? Mongolia is like, it's a beautiful place. If you look at like a lot of the natural geography of Mongolia, is so beautiful, man. I can't picture any other country that has a better natural geography than Mongolia. It's so beautiful just because of that. Of course, the Mongol culture, the Mongolian traditions and cultures and stuff like this. Obviously, Mongolia is the birthplace of Genghis Khan, so obviously that has its own merit in that way. Mongolia is the natural geography is so amazing and beautiful stuff. It's like a very mystical place, Mongolia and stuff. Very mystical, very enchanting, very eye-catching. China is kind of a lot like it's very similar. Although obviously there's different parts of China. China's a very big country. What I mean? Different parts of it. And obviously, these different parts of China, they have their own kind of they have their own benefits and beauty, and obviously also problems and issues. Especially if we're just looking at the cities in China, obviously that's not very pretty, is it? There's a lot of pollution and stuff like that in these types of cities in China. If you go to more rural, what do I mean by rural, like parts, places that are kind of detached from the major cities, centers and stuff like this. Places are kind of more natural, so to speak. These types of places are very beautiful. They're sort of a lot like Mongolia. Obviously Mongolia is literally right on top of China, so they share a lot of the same geography and geographical features. But in terms of Asia, East Asia, obviously China and Mongolia are very interesting places to look at and visit and kind of see and be inspired by, because these countries are kind of very the geographies in these countries are very awe-inspiring and obviously beautiful and stuff like this. You could just kind of let's go on Google and type in Mongolia and China. Look at the natural geographies in these countries. It's very beautiful and pretty. In East Asia, these countries are probably at the top. And obviously Japan's very this kind of has a lot of the similar features. Obviously Japanese culture is very sophisticated, very attractive, obviously as well. So that's why Japan's on this list as well. On my list of on the list of countries I really admire in East Asia. China, Mongolia, Japan, Mongolia, China, Japan, Japan, Mongolia, China, China, Mongolia, Japan. These countries are my favorite countries in East Asia, just because of the geographical features. I mean, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Natural geography. You know what that means? A lot of the scenery and stuff like that in the wild. In these countries have a lot of beautiful natural geography, natural wildlife areas and stuff like this, and it's very pretty. You can just kind of do your own research on this. Japan is obviously very the culture of Japan's very interesting, obviously as well. Obviously Chinese culture is also interesting. Mongolian culture is not really that sophisticated, but it's also interesting. Obviously Mongolia was the birthplace of Genghis Khan, so that's kind of very interesting as well in its own way. And these are my favorite countries in Asia, in terms of what countries in Asia that I like the most. I really admire China, Mongolia, Japan. In terms, obviously, East Asia. South Asia is kind of its own thing. And obviously, South Asia is kind of, obviously, you have India, then you have India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and a lot of people would also include Afghanistan, although a lot of people would also say that Afghanistan's more culturally linked to the Middle East, so it's not really even it should not even be considered a part of South Asia. South Asia. I don't really like India or Indian culture at all, whatsoever. I don't really have any interest in India at all. It's kind of a very crowded, polluted area and stuff. It's not really my cup of tea at all. Bangladesh is basically India. It's the same type of place with the same type of people. Pakistan's obviously a little bit different. Of course, Pakistan is kind of, obviously there's Indians that live there and there's other groups as well. Pakistan's probably, in terms of South Asia, that's probably my favorite type of country, Pakistan. And obviously if we're discussing Afghanistan, obviously Afghanistan has a ton of problems. It's very war-torn, it's not very attractive. Probably, actually, I'd actually prefer India than Afghanistan. But Pakistan's probably, in terms of South Asia, that's probably my favorite type of country in South Asia, Pakistan, obviously. And maybe Nepal, but I do not like India at all. It's kind of very crowded, it's very disgusting. It's a very disgusting place if you can imagine yourself going there. There's plenty of videos on YouTube that you can go on and you can get a kind of a glimpse of what it looks like in India. It's a very disgusting place, and I don't really find Indian culture attractive at all as well. Nepal, obviously Nepal, the reason why I'm kind of separating Nepal here is because Nepal was kind of the birthplace of the Buddha. Buddhism was kind of born in this type of place called Nepal, and so it's very attractive in that way. And that's why I'll kind of separate it from India, but India is kind of very disgusting in my opinion. India, Bangladesh, obviously Sri Lanka is also a part of this. These types of places are very disgusting in my opinion. They're not very attractive. So in terms of South Asia, Pakistan is the only type of place I would consider visiting and going to and stuff. Okay, so this is Asia, right? Obviously, a lot of people would consider Southeast Asia. What do I mean by Southeast Asia? Countries like Thailand. What other countries are in Southeast Asia? Thailand, I don't know. Oh, Thailand's very popular. Vietnam. You got Vietnam, you got, what other countries are in Southeast Asia? Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia. Actually, Malaysia and Indonesia, those are very pretty places, although they're crowded. They're very crowded and stuff, and the people aren't really the best. Maybe, I don't know, there might be a lot of criminals there and stuff, and poverty problems and stuff like this. But maybe Malaysia and Indonesia, although in Malaysia and Indonesia, these countries aren't really my cup of tea. I do not like Southeast Asia, of course. A lot of people would consider Southeast Asia to be like their best favorite destinations to go to and stuff like this. But I do not like these types of places, in my opinion. I don't know, it's too hard. Compare like a place like Indonesia and Malaysia to like Mongolia and China. I don't know. I like countries that are more, they're not too south, they're not too warm, but they're not too cold. Like Mongolia is kind of like in the middle. It's so beautiful in that way. Southeast Asian countries are kind of too south, in my opinion. They're not really that appealing because of this kind of issue and stuff. Southeast Asia, people would consider that. They would consider, like, when I'm talking about Asia, what about Southeast Asia? In my opinion, I don't really have any type of personal favorites from Southeast Asia. I believe a lot of the countries are very similar, and I don't really have any type of interest in these places in Southeast Asia. So, okay, I'm kind of all over the place, but, in terms of my favorite countries in Asia, it would be, in terms of East Asia, it would be China, Mongolia, Japan, and then South Asia would be just Pakistan. That's it, and that's basically Asia for me. Obviously, what about Australia, Papua New Guinea? What about like these countries are kind of loosely, they're geographically next to Asia, but they're kind of on their own. What about these places? Australia is kind of just sort of not really. It's very ridiculous. It's a very ridiculous type of place. I don't know. Australia is kind of very but what do I mean by ridiculous? It's kind of, well, I don't really find the Australian culture to be attractive at all. It's like a very dumbed down version of British culture. It's like British culture without any of like the positives and benefits. It's like a very dumbed down version of British culture, and then you have this type of other types of things are kind of make Australia very stupid. I don't know. I do not care for like Australia, or even want to kind of even imagine what Australia is or what it might look like. And Australia is kind of it's not a place I would ever consider visiting at all in my entire lifetime. Obviously, a lot of you would be like, oh, it's got like a bunch of different attractive places that you can look at and visit, and blah 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 blah. And I don't care because I don't like Australia or Australian culture or the Australian accent. This is this is a very like kind of a side tangent. It is kind of like it might be random, but the Australian accent. Have you properly listened to that type of accent? It's a very obnoxious accent. Imagine let's just say you got married to like an Australian person and you have to listen to that accent for the rest of your life. That's a very ugly accent. It's like the British accent, but it's even more broken up and chalky and kind of annoying and hard to listen to and stuff. Australia is just completely yeah, it's not something I would even consider. And then what about these other countries next to Australia? These countries are kind of loosely broken off from Asia, but they're close to Asia and stuff. You know, what about New Zealand? New Zealand's obviously a lot like Australia. Obviously, Australia and New Zealand, these types of places, they're like related to the United Kingdom. Obviously, they're a part of the Anglosphere. But you know, these types of countries, these places and stuff like that. New Zealand, Australia and stuff, I don't know. They're not interesting, they're not important. I don't like the accents that these people have. I don't like their culture. I don't like what they've built in these places at all. I do not even want to consider these places to be real. And what about Papua New Guinea and Polynesia and these other types of island countries? Well, they're not even important at all, so I'm not gonna kind of waste any more time on them. Now, alright, so this was Asia. So in terms of Asia, let me just quickly do a little recap on Asia. One of my favorite countries in Asia, specifically East Asia, would be China, Mongolia, Japan. And for South Asia, it would just be Pakistan, that's it. And that's basically Asia. So, okay, I'm just gonna go on to Europe. And you know, Europe's obviously a very, in terms of like travel destinations, Europe's obviously on the top of a lot of people's lists. It's the birthplace of so many important inventions, discoveries. So many important people were born in Europe. So much philosophy and science and stuff like this was developed inside of Europe. So what are my favorite countries inside of Europe? And to be honest, I'm not really too keen on Europe at all, but so I don't really have a lot to say on this. But you know, in terms of my favorite countries in Europe, it would be, I don't know, the UK is obviously going to be up there. The UK is probably going to be at the top of my list because it's a place that I'm very familiar with. I was kind of raised in the UK and stuff like that. And I'm kind of familiar with the culture. And it's not just because the UK is it's a very unique part of Europe. The UK, England, Scotland. I mean, I don't know if Ireland's a part of the UK. England, Scotland. I don't know. I'm not really. Even though I was raised here, I don't know a lot of the different parts of the UK. You know, Wales, all this stuff. I don't know. The UK is it's a very interesting part of Europe. Why is this? It's because the UK is it takes a little bit of it takes different bits of what makes Europe, right? And it I don't know, it mixes all of these different bits up into its own type of stew and soup, and that's the UK. The UK is I don't know. It's like a weird part of Europe. It's not even it literally isn't even a part of Europe. It's like its own island country, which is kind of super interesting. But you know, the UK is in terms of Europe, the UK is obviously my favorite place to be. And then what about these other countries? There, when I say Europe, there's Western Europe. Western Europe countries are obviously at the west of Europe. The UK, obviously, France. I don't know about Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany. Maybe, I don't know. And then Eastern Europe is the Slavic countries like Russia, Poland. I don't know, other types of countries that are Slavic, that are filled with Slavic people. I don't know too much about Eastern Europe because I just do not like Europe. You have Western Europe and then you have Eastern Europe. Obviously, I just really prefer Western Europe to Eastern Europe. I do not like Eastern European cultures and countries, and anything to do with Eastern Europe I do not like at all. Russia I do not like countries in Eastern Europe. Period. I don't even know. I'm not even going to bother naming you all of the different countries in Eastern Europe because I do not like Eastern Europe at all. So yeah, I hate Eastern Europe. Actually, I hate their culture and civilization. I do not like it at all. Western Europe's a lot more interesting. The UK, obviously, I mentioned it. You know, when I'm discussing Europe, you can kind of dichotomize it, break it up into these two different parts. Like there's Western Europe and Eastern Europe. I hate Eastern Europe. I do not like Eastern Europe and Eastern European cultures and civilizations and blah 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 blah, and what they have built for themselves. I do not like their civilization at all. Eastern Europe. Western Europe, obviously, you have the UK is probably my favorite place to be. France is kind of whatever. I'm not really too keen on France. Obviously, France has a lot of different interesting aspects. It's probably my third favorite place to be in Europe. And then you would have Spain and Portugal, and these are probably, they're very nice places, obviously, and they're very interesting places in Europe because they're very south, and so they're probably very warm, and there are a lot of beaches and stuff. So Spain and Portugal, I might consider these to be my second favorite places to be in Europe, just because of there was there used to be a Muslim civilization in Spain and Portugal, and that kind of left a lot of impact and influences and you can feel and see the influences when you're there and stuff. And that's what makes it kind of a little bit more interesting than the rest of Europe. It's not as boring as the rest of Europe because there used to be a Muslim civilization in Spain and Portugal and stuff, and that kind of it added a lot of flavor to that geography and country, into these countries, Spain and Portugal, to Iberia, because Iberia is kind of like its own part of Europe. Added a lot of spice to Iberia, to this place in Europe. Yeah, so in terms of Europe, Western Europe, obviously the UK is at the top of my list. Then I would have Spain and Portugal, because of Europe is more south, so it's more warmer, and I don't know. I guess that makes it more interesting and nicer to be the Spanish language. I don't know, Spanish cultures and Portuguese cultures, they're not as I guess soulless as, I don't know, like you go to, I mean, if you lived a lot in Europe and you went to a lot of different European countries, you can kind of, especially if countries like Germany, like countries that are more, I don't know, in like inside of the heart of Europe, they're very soulless sometimes. I don't know, maybe that's just me, I don't know. Spain and Portugal is more south. It's more south in Europe, so it's warmer, and that kind of, it creates a different culture and environment. So that's why I would kind of really admire that type of place. It would be probably my third favorite place to be inside of Europe. The UK would be my first favorite place to be when we're discussing Europe. What about my second favorite place? That would be in terms of Europe, I don't know, I guess maybe Spain and Portugal would be my second favorite place to be in Europe. The UK would be my first favorite place, and then I guess for third would be France, and then I don't know, I'm not going to bother listing the other countries because they're not really that important. What about Italy and Italy, and so what about Greece? I don't like these types of countries. I don't like these countries at all. I don't like I never found, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't really like Italian culture or the Italian language, or Greek culture or the Greek language, or what's kind of made in these types of countries, what these countries have to offer. I do not like it at all. So I don't want to waste any time on Italy and Greece, and obviously there's other types of countries that are next to these countries, and I don't really even want to mention them. They're not very important in my opinion. So that's Europe. In terms of Europe, I hate Eastern Europe. I hate the Eastern European countries. I hate Slavic countries. I hate Slavic cultures and Slavic civilizations and whatever the Slavs made for themselves. I hate it. I freaking hate it. I hate Eastern Europe. You know what else I hate about Eastern Europe? Especially Russia. The Cyrillic alphabet. I hate that. I hate the way I hate their writing system. I hate how it's kind of like is used in Central Asia and Mongolia and stuff like that. I hate it. I hate the Slavic civilization. I do not like Eastern Europe at all. So again, in terms of Europe, I hate Eastern Europe. I love Western Europe a little bit more. And in terms of Western Europe, like, one of my favorite countries, the UK, even though obviously people say, well, it's not really, I mean, you can be a little bit more specific. I'm just going to give you my very straightforward answer on that. And I don't know, I don't want to waste a lot of time. In terms of my favorite countries, in Western Europe, because I hate Eastern Europe, I like Western Europe a lot more. In terms of Western Europe, I would, obviously the UK is at the top of my list, and Spain and Portugal and stuff, and maybe France, and that's basically it for Europe. Maybe I don't really like Germany and these other types of countries are like they're kind of in the middle of Europe. They're not Eastern Europe, but they're not Western Europe, but they're in the middle. I don't really like these types of countries, and Italy and Greece I don't care about and stuff. And so that's basically Europe. I like Western Europe more than Eastern Europe, and the countries that I like in Western Europe the most are the UK, Spain, Portugal, and France. That's it. That's for Europe. What about the rest of the world? What about Africa? Africa is not something I would even want to kind of waste too much time on. It's kind of, especially sub-Saharan Africa. You know what I mean by that? I do not like sub-Saharan Africa for a variety of reasons that are too controversial to bring up in this video. North Africa is kind of different. In terms of North Africa, I guess, even Egypt had a very interesting past in history, but Egypt's kind of filled with it's kind of crowded. The people there are kind of a little bit. You can kind of get a look at them you just go on Google, go on YouTube, type in walking around Egypt. You would kind of get a look at the types of people there. So maybe that kind of makes me kind of not like that type of place. Africa, I do not like Africa at all. I hate Africa. I do not want to go there ever, period, for no reason. For any type of reason, I would never ever consider going to Africa. So that's Africa. What about the okay, so you have Asia, right? You have Europe, you have Africa, and what's left? The Middle East. well, okay, first of all, what is the Middle East? You know, I don't know. It's kind of a vague definition. Is it only Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Dubai and stuff like this? Even though I don't know about Dubai being a country, but whatever. I don't like Arab countries at all. Period. I do not like the Arab civilization at all. I do not like the Arab countries. I do not like the Middle East at all. You know, a lot of people kind of see this being kind of a little bit as being kind of weird and mean, maybe, and kind of a little bit too aggressive. But I don't like the Middle East at all in terms of the cultures that they have there, in terms of the civilizations they've built. I do not like it at all. I do not like any of the Arab countries at all and stuff. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Yemen, these Arab countries, I hate them. I hate Arab countries so much. I hate Arab countries. I'm Pakistani, by the way. I'm not an Arab, even though we look very similar. I don't know. I do not like Arab countries. I do not like Arab countries. I hate Arab countries. I hate. When I say hate, I literally hate the like Arab countries. I hate like the Arab civilization. Maybe I'm being too aggressive on this. I don't know. I just do not. I would never consider visiting like any type of Arab country. So that's that. In terms of the Middle East, the Arab countries. Obviously, you have Iran, and a lot of people just consider Iranians to be Arabs because they're Muslims and they're brown and they look the same anyway. So I don't know. What about Iran? Oh, is it? I don't know. I don't know, it's very vague, but is that an Arab country? I don't know. But Iran is kind of not very interesting. I don't like Iran. I don't like Iranian culture or the Iranian civilization at all. So I don't care about Iran. In terms of, so if that's the Middle East, obviously Afghanistan's just horrendous. It's horrible. There really isn't even a civilization there at the moment. It's kind of a disgusting place to be. So is that really all the Middle East? Well, what about Turkey? Turkey's kind of like it's in Anatolia. Obviously, a lot of people just consider Turkish people to be Arabs because they're Muslims and stuff. Well, and that's obviously not appropriate. Obviously, Turks, they have their own history. They obviously come from Central Asia, maybe northern China and stuff. Maybe, I don't know. Their history is kind of a little bit it's a little bit too wishy-washy, but I don't know. But in terms of the Middle East, maybe Turkey might be the only place I would consider to visit and go to and stuff. Turkey, but a lot of people wouldn't consider Turkey to even be a part of the Middle East. A lot of people just consider the Middle East to be Arab countries and maybe Iran and Afghanistan, and that's it. So in terms of the Middle East, I hate Arab countries. I hate Iran. I hate Afghanistan. So I don't like these places at all. Turkey is like it's very like what is the Middle East? Is Turkey a part of the Middle East? It's kind of all of this is kind of very hard to kind of sum up, and it's obviously subjective. But Turkey, if Turkey is a part of the Middle East, then it's the only place I'll really consider going if we're discussing the Middle East. And that's the Middle East. I hate a lot of the Middle East. Maybe only Turkey is the place that I would consider visiting, and that's because Turkey's not really shouldn't even really be considered a part of the Middle East. I mean, obviously geographically it's connected to the Middle East, but it's got its own separate civilization that's more interesting and attractive. But the Middle East, I hate the Middle East. I hate Arab countries and I hate Iran and stuff like this. I do not like these types of places. So that's the Middle East. Okay, so I've damn, my freaking camera got too hot and it shut off. But to continue from where I left off, or I guess to continue from the point where my camera shut off. I mean, what was I saying before? So far, I've covered in terms of like what are my favorite countries. I covered Asia, I covered Europe, I covered Africa and the Middle East, and the other places aren't really that important, so they're not worth mentioning at all. All right, so what's left? What about North America? North America, what's North America? North America, a lot of people just consider it to be the US, Canada, Mexico, maybe, I don't know, because Mexico is more, in terms of culture, it's kind of more related to South America, but whatever. But North America is, obviously, North America has got a lot of interesting geographical features and stuff like this, but I don't really, kind of care too much about North America. I don't know, it's a very, I don't know, it's just not very particularly interesting to me, and I don't know. It's kind of like it's a place where you can make a lot of money, and that's how I see. Especially the U.S. and Canada. I don't know. Mexico's kind of I don't know. It's not really a place I would ever want to visit, especially Mexico. Like, let's just kind of not even think about Mexico for a minute. Let's just only focus on like the U.S. and Canada. When I say North America, this is like what you should kind of be thinking about: the U.S. and Canada, the U.S. Canada and the United States. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know. there's a lot of good, there's like very interesting subcultures in, especially the US, like you have African American, like musical genres like jazz, hip hop, rap, stuff like this in the US. I don't know, and that's kind of interesting. And other, you have like the Statue of Liberty, New York City and stuff, and Marvel and DC and stuff, and a bunch of different important franchises and subcultures, and a lot of different interesting things inside of the US. The US is kind of like a very interesting place. A lot of people are very harsh on the US for a lot of reasons, for a lot of different political reasons, but I'm not like that. I'm not going to be like that in this video. I believe the US does have a lot to offer the world, and it's a very interesting place, and it has developed a lot of interesting cultures and genres of different things in music. And obviously African American music's very interesting, and so the US, in terms of like, what do I mean by the US? Canada and the United States. These places there are places where you can make a lot of money. That's what I would say, right? There's a lot of interesting things that have been made and developed in these places, like in Canada and the United States. So in North America, if we had to kind of quickly make a little hierarchy, I'll put the US above Canada. I don't know. Canada's kind of, the geography of it is kind of extreme. It's very cold and stuff. It's also, this history, like the US has a little bit, it has a more interesting history. There's more things that have been made and developed in the US than in Canada. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say on North America. If we're talking about Canada and the US, I don't really have a lot to say. Mexico's not even worth talking about. So, that's North America. What about South America? Brazil, I don't know, the other countries, Argentina, these other countries that were invaded and colonized by Spanish and Portuguese people. I don't know. I don't really care about South America at all. I do not have any type of favorites that I would like to pick out. So I don't know. I don't care about South America. I don't want to visit South America. I don't really like South America. I don't care too much about South America. It's not a place where I would even want to spend my time at all. So and that's basically it. That's like kind of my take on what are my favorite countries and what are my favorite parts of the world and stuff. Obviously, I feel more closer to Asia. And maybe Western Europe, at least Western Europe, not Eastern Europe, definitely not Italy and Greece, and these other types of sovereign European countries that are not next to Spain and Portugal, that maybe are next to Spain and Portugal, I don't know. But that's kind of my take on one of my favorite countries of the world. These are my favorite countries and parts of the world. I feel very, very close to Asia, East Asia. Specifically not South Asia. India is kind of disgusting. Pakistan's okay. Afghanistan's kind of disgusting. It's war-torn. It's very underdeveloped. Not very attractive. So yeah, I feel very close to East Asia and Western Europe. Though those are like my favorite places to be. I don't like the Middle East at all. I don't like Arab countries. I don't like Iran. I hate Africa actually. I don't want to waste any more time on Africa. The other parts of the world aren't very interesting to me. I feel very, very close to East Asia and Western Europe. Yeah, that's what I would say. I feel very close to East Asia, and specifically Mongolia, China, and Japan, and Western Europe. So that'll be the UK, Spain, and Portugal. And I say those will be like my favorite types of countries, and Pakistan obviously as well. And that's basically it. And yeah. Oh, I forgot about Scandinavia and Madagascar. And there's a ton of other places I didn't really talk about, but damn, I don't know. I can't waste a lot of time on this. I don't know. I don't care about Scandinavia. I don't care about Madagascar. I don't care about these other countries I haven't named. A lot of you might be pissed off in the comments, or a lot of you might be getting angry at me. You missed this part of the world. I don't care, because these parts of the world, these types of countries I didn't mention, they're not important at all. I don't care about them, so I'm not gonna waste time on them at all. Ha ha ha. That's my opinion on this. A lot of you might be angry at me because I missed like some type of country that I didn't name properly or whatever. I don't care about that country. If I didn't name it, I don't care about it. It's not important at all in my opinion. It shouldn't even exist. I don't care about that country that I didn't name. A lot of you might be angry at me. Oh, you missed this country. I don't care about that country. If I didn't name a country that you like, I don't care about it. That's it.